All right, so we're going to take a look at the three forms of quadratics. All right, pause the video and go ahead and complete out the coordinates of the characteristics for each of these graphs. I want the vertex, the x-intercept, and the y-intercept for each of these graphs. Once you complete that, please answer example 4 and example 5 before continuing on to the video. Okay, so now that you've answered everything on this page, based on the answers on the previous page, what connections can you make between each quadratic form and the characteristics of that graph? Without using Desmos, what features can you identify directly from each form? So you should have noticed that from standard form, you can get the y-intercept, which is the number that does not have a variable. So again, what characteristics can you get from standard form? The y-intercept, which is the number without the variable. All right, what can you get from factored form? And you can see in factored form, you have x. That's how I remember that. The x-intercepts. And the x-intercepts are the opposite of whatever these numbers are right here. So you can get your x-intercept, singular or / plural, and it's the opposite of the number inside the parentheses. Okay, so in other words, our y-intercept is equal to -8. So let's go ahead and write that down. So that's going to be x and then y. So we're going to go 0, -8. And then our x-intercept, opposite of -2, which is +2. So again, you start x, which is +2, then y, which is 0. And the other one, opposite of -4, is going to be +4 and then 0. Okay. What can I get from vertex form? Vertex form is exactly what it sounds like. It's in the question. Vertex form gives me the vertex. So I've got the x number, which is the opposite, because anytime you're inside the parentheses, it's opposite. And then you got the y number outside. All right, so let's write that out. So it's going to be, you can get the vertex, and we're going to say x coordinate opposite of number inside the parentheses, and y coordinate is number exactly outside. All right, what that means is exactly what you see. So let's go ahead and write down the vertex. So this is going to be, anytime you're inside, it's going to be x and opposite. So that's going to be +3. So this vertex is +3. And then the number outside is exactly what you see is the y, which is +1. So our vertex in this case is 3, 1. All right, so that's what you get from the different forms. So let's take a look at these individual forms in detail. So we have the standard form. So this is what standard form looks like. Standard form is some function, or you can say y equals, and you can see it has something x squared, something x, and then a number. So to write that in general, it's going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. And all that says is some number with x squared, some other number with x, and then some number without anything. All right, so when you graph that, a quadratic equation creates either a U shape, I'm even going to say a U or N shape curve called a parabola. From any of the forms, I can tell the direction of my parabola. In other words, is my parabola U or an N? And it's based on right where the very front with the highest power, if that's positive or negative. So if A, all right, so if A is positive, now just think about that for a second. Positive people are generally what? Happy people. All right, so if A is positive, it is a U. Whereas if A is negative, all right, negative people are unhappy people. All right, so if A is positive, you're happy. If A is negative, you're unhappy. So that tells you it's a U if it's positive and it's an N if it's negative. The reason that that's important is because if it is a U, now you can see this is a what? A minimum. And if it's a unhappy person, if they're negative, this is a maximum. Okay, so you can say if it's a minimum or a maximum, not necessarily the coordinates, just based on what your A value is. Okay, now let's take a look at a couple of things, because we've already established, and I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this here, that your plus C is your what? Your y-intercept. Okay, so now that we know that, without using a calculator, we can make a rough sketch and we can tell some characteristics based on the form. So this is a quadratic form, and I'm looking at what is my A value right here, invisible +1. So what can you say about that? That I have a happy person. So when I sketch this, I'm going to draw somebody who is happy, positive, a positive person, right? So you are, if you are a happy person, you are opening up. You have a what value here? Is this a minimum or a maximum? It is a minimum. And you can also tell the y-intercept, and the y-intercept, remember, is this number by itself. So the y-intercept, and if you're writing it as a coordinate, it's going to be 0, -5. All right, so now that you know that, you can of course sketch that. So this is happening at -5. I don't know my x value, but that's okay. So I'm just going to draw something like this. It is just a sketch where my y-intercept is happening at -5. Not necessarily the minimum, just my y-intercept. All right, I'm going to do one more and then you're going to do one. All right, so example 2. So what do I have? My A value this time is -1. What does that mean? It means negative people are what kind of people? Unhappy people. So now I have what kind of parabola? An N with a maximum. So this is opening down with a maximum, right? And the y-intercept, again, is the number without any variables, which is 7. So writing that in coordinates, it's going to be 0, then 7. And for right now, because this is a sketch, it doesn't matter exactly where I draw my x and my y axis. I just need to make sure that whatever I'm calling my intercepts, I'm going to call it over here. At this part right here, that is 7. So let me do that. And so this is going to be 7. That's all I know is my y-intercept. All right, so now that I've done 2 examples, go ahead and pause the video, see if you can do this one yourself. Let's practice.